Hi there, welcome to the Carr Brothers Show. It's episode 131. I'm Jack.
And I'm Jeff. And we have a great show for you tonight.
Yes.
With us tonight is Krista Ross, our newly appointed senator. It's not that new, I guess, but to us it's still
Yes.
new, it's still fresh, it's still exciting. Thank you for being here, Krista.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Very, very happy to have you. And we must say, too, that Jody couldn't make it. Normally, Jody would be here, the third of the Carrs, but he's unable to be here tonight, so he sends his regrets. So
Sends his
next
love.
show. Yes, he does. Well, it's been a little bit over a year now since you've been the senator, and it's gone by pretty quickly. And
It's gone by very quickly.
Talk about, I guess, first off, what does a lot of people still, and you may know this more because you're right into the thick of it, but a lot of people may not even realize what the role of the Senate is.
Sure.
Even after all these years of having the Senate. So how will you explain that, what the role of a senator is?
So the role of a senator and the role of the Senate in general is what we call sober second thought. So the Senate has the responsibility of reviewing every single bill that is passed into legislation and ensuring that it meets the needs of Canadians. So we study every single bill, and not one bill can be passed without being passed in the Senate. What is also interesting is that the bills have to be passed exactly the same in the House of Commons as they are in the Senate. So if a bill comes from the House of Commons to the Senate and we have first reading, second reading, it goes and is studied at committee, then it comes back for debate, and we make an amendment and then we pass it with an amendment, it has to go back to the House of Commons and be passed with that amendment as well. Or they can choose to amend it again or not pass it, or whatever the case may be. There are four types of bills. There are government bills and private members' bills from the House of Commons, and there are government bills and public bills, which is a private member bill, from the Senate. So certainly the ones that are from the government have to take priority. But there are a lot of private member bills and public bills that get through our processes as well. And it can take a short time or a long time for a bill to get through. But every single bill must go through the Senate in order to become law.
So the members of Parliament and the House of Commons, they don't necessarily have to accept the amendments from the Senate, or do they normally accept them, or does it just depend?
The Senate doesn't amend a lot of bills, but we certainly do some. And it is up to the House of Commons whether they wish to accept that amendment, or they can re-amend it and send it back to us.
Oh, so they do send it back then?
Yeah, it can go back and forth.
Okay.
The challenge is the timeline for something of that nature. So it depends on how timely a bill is. There are times when you might consider doing an amendment to a bill, but then decide ultimately it's better to get it passed than it is to make a small change that maybe could be handled in regulations.
Wow, so that's quite interesting. And now I can't remember if you were appointed as an independent senator or one of the parties.
So every senator is appointed as an independent senator.
Okay.
Every senator is appointed unaffiliated. In 2015, our Prime Minister decided to change the system whereby senators are appointed. He basically, how shall I say this, excused all the Liberal senators from the Liberal Party and from his caucus, and they became independent or unaffiliated senators. What ensued was a bit of chaos, from what I understand. But what ended up happening is that the Conservatives did stay affiliated as Conservatives, but everybody else became non-affiliated.
Okay.
But in order to have groups of like-minded people, research capabilities, staffing, and just for the ease of managing the process, some groups have been set up. So there's the Independent Senators Group, the Canadian Senators Group, and the Progressive Senators Group. None of these are affiliated with any political party, but they are generally like-minded. So I sit as part of the Canadian Senators Group, but we're independent senators. There are also a number of senators that are not affiliated with any of those groups.
Really? So does that affect how they have their research funding, or does every
sure
Senate-
does.
It does, eh?
Because the groups get certain amounts of
as
funding and
groups.
support, and also, working together and sharing resources. But it also is how the committees are set up. So committee seats are determined based on the size of the different groups. So depending on the size of your group, determines how many seats you get on the various Senate committees. So if you're a non-affiliated senator, they're not able to have an official seat. They can attend any Senate committee, they can participate,
But they don't have voting status.
They don't have voting status.
Okay.
And they also have to work with the other groups for speaking slots.
So did you decide which group to
did.
be on? So you get to decide as an independent senator, and how did that process go?
So when I was appointed by the Prime Minister, in our conversation, he suggested to me that I take some time to really think about which group I wanted to become a part of, if I did, in fact, want to do that. And so I took my time, and I was appointed in October 31st, Halloween, trick or treat, not sure.
Yeah.
And I was sworn in November, and I spent the next few months really watching the voting patterns, where people were on issues, even just their demeanor
Their tendencies.
in the Senate, and I also considered which group I might have opportunity for growth and learning and leadership.
Yeah.
So the Canadian Senators group did appeal to me, especially when we were doing standing votes. What I noticed was when I was standing to vote yay or nay, it seemed as if quite a number of the people in that group were as well. But none of the groups are whipped. Everybody votes what they think is best for their province, for their region, for underrepresented groups, and for the country. So it's really a different system, and I think what happens is we vote on the merits of any particular bill and how it will impact the people in our regions, as opposed to voting on party lines.
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen.
So refreshing.
That is refreshing. So now, how many are you on a committee?
Yeah, so every senator has the opportunity, as I said, to participate in any committee that they're interested in. So I did sort of sit in on different committees. I knew that
Just
probably
to get a flavor
just to get a feel for the work they were doing.
Good for you.
And I watched some. All of the Senate committees and the Senate itself are televised live. So I watched some of them as well, those that I couldn't attend. And I knew that I would probably be interested in something related to business because of my background with the Chamber of Commerce and as a business owner. So I ended up on National Finance Committee, which is a perfect committee for me because it's all about the budgets, the estimates, and anything to do with the finances of the country. And that's something I'm very interested in, and how decisions that are made in Ottawa will affect New Brunswickers and people in Atlantic Canada. And of course, I have a lens over that of business. How will it affect the business community?
Yeah. And the other thing too is, I guess there'd be quite a broad range of issues when you tie that into finance and the budget. Like
Absolutely.
You can tie that into all of the issues, really, a lot of them. So.
And most of our budget implementation acts are really omnibus bills. So they do cover a lot of ground, not just budget issues. So there's a lot of study that takes place, and not just Finance Committee looks at the BIA. Other committees look at it as well, depending on what the issues are. And then at the end of the day, that bill comes to the Senate with a report from the National Finance Committee and moves forward. One thing that we can do on money bills, which is interesting, a lot of times people say, well, if it's a money bill, you can't really vote against it. Well, you can. But you can also add comments to the reports that are given that say, we're putting forward this bill to be approved, but we have concerns about this or this, and really identify things that we think might be issues that should be addressed.
Nice. That's a good opportunity. Now, we're going to talk in the next segment about your 20 years being executive director of the Fredericton Chamber and your prior business experience and things like that. But you were the executive director of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce and then got appointed to the Senate. So what we're really interested in knowing is, how did that whole process come about that you all of a sudden it's announced Krista Ross is one of the senators' names. So a lot of behind the scenes, obviously.
So how it happened is actually a gentleman by the name of Alex LeBlanc. I don't know if you're watching, Alex, but shout out. He contacted me one day. He had been the head of the New Brunswick Business Council, and prior to that with the New Brunswick Multicultural Council. And he said that he had been talking to someone about the Senate, and he thought I would be a perfect candidate. So he called me out of the blue and said, you should apply to become a senator. And I thought, oh, that's really flattering. And I had appeared at Senate committees as a witness before, and I knew a little bit about the Senate, but not a lot. So I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, and I didn't really think much more of it. And he proceeded to call me every couple of weeks.
Oh, wow.
Until I actually took the time to review the information, and I got excited about it. And I thought, this would be a perfect fit for me. This is perfect. It's nonpartisan, but it's politics and policy. I wouldn't be a politician, I'd be a parliamentarian. Like, it's a perfect fit for someone with my background and with my passion for policy and for helping my community, my province. So I did apply, and I was very fortunate. You have to have letters of support. So I was super fortunate that David Allward wrote one of my letters, Frank McKenna wrote one of my letters, and Perrin Beatty, the newly retired CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and a good friend, wrote one of my letters. So I was very, absolutely, one of the youngest ever federal cabinet ministers. I think he was the youngest ever Minister of Revenue, Finance.
Wow.
So I put the application in, and then I waited about 1.5 years.
Wow.
So I'm accustomed to things happening at the speed of business. So I thought, well, it's been 1.5 years. Clearly that's not going to happen. So I decided to retire. So I gave my retirement notice at the Chamber of Commerce, and I actually applied to take the ICD Director's Education Program. And I thought, well, you know, I don't really want to do anything full-time, Freedom 55. Maybe I'll be a corporate director.
So that had no connection, no direct connection.
No,
of your retirement.
I was halfway through my retirement notice, because I gave them 6 months notice, and I was working with the new CEO, Morgan Peters, who had been my right and left hand, my policy guru for over 10 years, and getting him ready to step into the role, because the chamber had decided he was the next person in the CEO role. And I got the call.
Wow.
And I wasn't supposed to tell anybody. They said you could tell your spouse. Well, I don't have a spouse, so I thought, what's the equivalent of a spouse? I will tell my daughter and my work husband. So
that sounds like a good trade-off.
Morgan Peters and my daughter Rachel were the two people that I told, and I told him because I knew we had to accelerate the process of the handover. And then I had to basically resign immediately as CEO, and then I finished, I think, another couple of weeks just to tie things up.
Yeah.
And
right to Ottawa.
a couple of weeks later, I was in Ottawa.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
That's quite a story.
during that period of not being able to tell anyone until the announcement, I mean, that must have been difficult. At least you were able to tell 2 people, but very difficult to be able to keep that in. And
Well, it was difficult, but at the same time, we didn't know when it was actually going to be announced until it was announced.
Okay.
So I knew it was coming, but I didn't know either that Joan Kingston and John McNair would be appointed with me.
No kidding.
And only found out about it the day of the appointment, October 31st.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how we used to do cabinet selections as well. You wouldn't even know until you got to the building
showed up.
Who else
getting
was there?
sworn in.
Everyone who showed up or didn't show up.
And now
Like in
Susan
my
has
case.
changed that a little bit and published it in advance, and so it's not such a guessing game.
Angst.
Surprise for some and not for others. But
Yeah.
That's very interesting. But a 1.5 years, wow, that's. I can see where you would, but
what I
really
did find out,
positions open, not,
Yeah,
this, that, and the other thing. So.
and to be honest, I thought a year and a half was a terribly long time to wait in the wings and not hear anything. But turns out some people wait 4 or 5 years.
Oh,
so
sure.
I didn't realize that that was the timeline, because it's all very, I wouldn't say it's secretive, but there's not a lot of information about that part of the process. But the process itself, any Canadian can apply. There's a certain criteria. You have to be, you have to own property in the province in which you reside and want to represent. You have to be a certain age. You have to, but any Canadian can apply, and I think that's pretty amazing. And
interesting.
What has happened is the Senate is full of, I'm humbled by the colleagues that I'm surrounded by. Constitutional lawyers, social workers, teachers, nurses, doctors, physicists, like just the cream of the crop of every kind of profession, and people who want to serve their country. It's amazing.
All sorts of backgrounds.
Yeah.
So
and passions.
Well, exactly, and great melting pot and diverse Canadians. What was it like during your swearing in, but also the first time that you sat in your seat in the Senate chambers?
So the swearing in was very special. I actually used my mom's family Bible for my swearing in. She couldn't come up to Ottawa, but I did have my daughter there and a group of friends, and so that was pretty special. And it was really awe-inspiring. And when you're reading and repeating those words as you're being sworn in, you realize the seriousness and the gravity of the commitment that you're making, really making a big commitment. And it's still the age of 75. So for me, from the time I was appointed, it's a 19-year commitment. And it's a very big commitment. And you take it very seriously that nothing stands in the way of your Senate work.
Yeah, and that's what you signed up for.
And you take it very seriously.
I do.
I can see, and we can tell by your online activity and the work that you do in committees and such, that you do take it very seriously. And we're happy for that, because I think just like any other role, there are those that take their role more or less seriously than others, and it's important because it's a very important role. To be the sober second thought on legislation is.
Since I've been in the Senate, I probably would have thought that there would be some that would take it more seriously than others too, but I have not met even one senator who's dialing it in. Everybody is there. They're present. They're debating. They're learning. They're sharing. It's a very it's a very collaborative workspace, and it feels, because it's so much smaller too than the House of Commons, even when we're full house, we're only 105, it really feels like a family. And because people stay for a long time, you really get to know people and form really strong relationships. Not just in your own group, but cross groups, and because the groups aren't politically aligned, it's very easy to work together with colleagues from other groups on bills that are important to both. So.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're going to talk more about the Senate in our other segments.
Okay.
And we also want to talk about your experience, 20 years as the executive director of the Fredericton Chamber. And that's how we first met when I was a reporter. So we're going to talk about that.
That's been a few years ago.
It has been, yes. And your experiences as a business owner, and how that all helped during your role as a chamber executive, and also on the Senate now and helping New Brunswickers. So we're going to talk about that and much more on the Carr Brothers Show. We'll be back right after this. Hello there, welcome back to the Carr Brothers Show. It's episode 131. I'm Jack.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jody couldn't be here. He sends his regrets, and we have him on for the next show, of course. And if you're tuning in, of course, you're watching us either on CHCO TV, which we're now on Rogers TV, we're on Shaw, and we're on Bell. So we're on every household that has cable in New Brunswick has access to CHCO TV. So we're happy that that has taken place within the last year. And we're on our Facebook page, YouTube, and your favorite podcasters. So we are
find us anywhere.
You can. And we're very pleased to have Krista Ross. She's been appointed as a senator, longtime colleagues and friends, and for just a little bit over a year, you've been a senator representing New Brunswick, and it's great to have you. Now what we'd like to talk about is your experience, 20 years as the executive director of the Fredericton Chamber. Sounds like a lot of years. And prior and in the middle of your stint as the executive director, a private business owner as well. A tremendous amount of experience, and that's how we got to meet. You got to meet Krista through being
I was Jody's executive assistant and was able to attend regional caucus meetings with the chamber, and I would be the fly on the wall in the back, writing the notes really diligently, while my minister and other ministers explained government policies of the day, and Krista would grill them and rake them over the coals somewhat, but always a great relationship. And I was fortunate enough to be able to start my journey and relationship with the chamber at that time as a staffer.
And I was a reporter for, back then it was KHJ, Capital FM, and the Fox, so private radio in Fredericton. And that's just a young reporter, got to, you were great to be able to help me and teach me about some issues. I'd come to the board meetings or events, and you were really, really great and welcoming for especially new reporters. So you're a 2-time Chamber Executive of the Year in Canada, named that. That is great, Krista. And just talk a little bit about your 20 years representing businesses,
How
small
it all
businesses.
started.
Well, I started with the Chamber as their general manager in 1989. I had been working for downtown Moncton as their marketing director, but I really wanted to get back to Fredericton. So I saw the opportunity to apply, and I was fortunate enough that they hired me. And I worked as general manager for 8 years. I loved every minute of it. I had a great staff. I had amazing board members that I learned from. The chamber grew during that time from about 275 members to about 600 by the time I left. So that was a big time of growth for the chamber.
And you're very young in '89, starting out doing this business.
Yeah,
And you're still young.
Still very young.
I was 21.
Well, we're close to the same age. We're close to the same age, so I can say that.
Yeah, I was.
That's a big venture.
Big role.
Yeah, it was. I was very fortunate that they had the faith in me at such a young age and without a lot of experience to take on such a role. So that was great. Then in 97, along with my then husband, we bought a printing franchise, some apartment buildings, a commercial building. We had a lot of small businesses, and I worked in our printing business for 14 years and loved every minute of that. I started out in sales. I ended up doing a lot of HR work and bookkeeping and just managing of the business, and really, really enjoyed that. And when the time came to leave that business, as luck would have it, the Chamber of Commerce CEO role had just become available. In fact, our new premier, Susan Holt, gave her notice, and the day that she gave her notice, I happened to be with her amongst a group of friends, and she asked me if I was going to apply for the job. And I said, "What job?" And she said, "I gave my notice today."
Wow.
And I said, "I am in. This is for me. It's
Meant to be.
perfect. I can't wait." And I just prayed that they would give me a chance to come back and to have a second opportunity to work at the chamber. So I did apply and went through quite a process of interviews and so on. And I think the reason that they decided, a lot of times people might not hire someone in the same role a second time. But I think the reason that they decided was that I had that chamber background and experience and that love of small business and entrepreneurship. But I was bringing with me a new set of skills and knowledge that I had gained as an entrepreneur. I had to make payroll. I had hired and fired people. I had dealt with, all kinds of tax issues and all of the things that, business people deal with. I had dealt with them. So I could bring that knowledge with me and really speak to those issues, to politicians, to the media, and to our members from a place of knowledge. So I was really lucky that the chamber gave me the opportunity to come back. And at the time I thought, well, maybe I'll do this for 5 years and we'll see what else is out there. But I loved it so much, and I had such a great team. I just loved my colleagues. I had great presidents every year, great board of directors. And by that time, our membership hit the 1,000 mark.
Wow.
So the largest chamber of commerce in New Brunswick and second largest in Atlantic Canada.
Wow.
And
assuming behind Halifax.
Correct,
right?
yeah.
So pretty good.
And so I stayed until I hit the age of 55 and decided I was going to retire. And well, you already know the rest of the story.
You know the next chapter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Morgan has big shoes to fill. Morgan,
I would say.
the new CEO there.
You know what?
But he's doing a great job.
He is doing incredible work.
He really is.
He has stepped up to the plate, and I mean, he's knocking it out of the park. He really is. He has an amazing knowledge base for policy work, and he brings that to the table along with just such a great personality, wonderful relationship builder, and certainly was my right and left hand for the years that we worked together at the chamber. So he and the rest of the team that I do miss, they kept me there for a very long time until it was time to, I thought, retire.
Well, there's nothing wrong with freedom 55. You can do it.
Yeah, and then this
great
opportunity with the as senator. How, when you've been in a short time as senator, a year and a few months, but how has your experience with the chamber and then also as a small business owner already with this little over a year, how has that helped with having those experiences?
It's helped tremendously. I think because as a chamber CEO, I had been a registered lobbyist, and I had been a witness at Senate committees in the past, and I had gone to Ottawa on Hill Days with the Canadian Chamber. And of course, you both know that I worked really closely with the provincial government, and not just one, but many premiers and governments over the years. So that background in policy work has just been amazing to bring with me to my new role. Just understanding even how the process of getting a bill passed works, but just also understanding the importance of communicating with stakeholders on issues around legislation. It has really underlined to me the importance of having great witnesses come in and speak to our committees on issues of concern. And it's really good to have a business person there who says, let's hear from the business community. Let's make sure we're putting a business lens on this. How is this going to impact entrepreneurs and small business owners? How will this impact SMEs? I mean, things like the HST holiday, not just looking at it from the perspective of, will this give a break to Canadians? But how will it impact small business? And I think those are issues and key concerns that, there's others in the Senate that have a business background. In my group, as a matter of fact, I think there are 6 previous CEOs in the group that I sit in. So I obviously too was attracted to a group that has some business background as well. I mean, there's certainly lots of other individuals in my group, but there's a lot of people with a business background as well.
Well, I could see, and just from watching you and knowing you, but watching your videos and your interactions with at committee and things like that, that your previous experience has allowed you to go into the Senate with confidence and the experience to understand the process and the tough questions that need to be asked with confidence too, because I watched you. And as you mentioned, the questions that you had for Minister Freeland, and I maybe wrongly or rightly commented on one of your videos that you knew the file better than Minister Freeland, and I don't doubt that. I've met Minister Freeland. She's a very, very capable person as well, very intelligent. And maybe I was a little bit wrong knowing all things now. Maybe she did know as much about the file as maybe more than we knew, or she was letting on. And now that she's resigned from cabinet, and it appears she didn't agree with that policy, but you were very respectful though when you had asked those tough questions, and as I commented, had more patience than I had, type of thing, because I've been in those seats asking those questions, and sometimes you don't get the answer you're looking for, or and answer it all. So to watch you do that is, as my senator, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I think it just adds that extra credibility to the role that we don't get to see. Like most New Brunswickers don't get to see what our senators are doing on a regular basis. So to watch that play out in kind of a nerdy chamber person as we are, loving that part of the profession or the game, it's refreshing to watch. So you do instill that confidence there. It's really neat to watch, and I'm proud of you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much.
Come from a long background, a long road to get there, and it's fun to watch.
It's been amazingly rewarding, and I'm learning every single day. I would say that I don't think I've ever read so much in my life as I have read.
Lots of briefing notes,
so many files, so many bills, and of course, because we're nonpartisan, because we're not whipped, because we're not told how to vote on a bill, I need to understand every single bill deeply.
And budgets.
So that I can vote on them in a way that I can then defend how I voted. Our voting record, particularly the standing votes, those records are all online for anybody to go in and see how we voted on things. And I need to be able to say, this is why I voted for this bill or I voted against this bill. And so we have to truly understand everything we're working on. Not to suggest that, other elected officials don't, but if you're told how to vote on something, it's a little different than having to make, forge your own path.
Having experienced it, we understand completely what you're talking about.
Exactly.
We've been there, and it's difficult when you're told to vote a certain way, and sometimes you don't always agree with that.
And I think that's what happened to Minister Freeland on the HST holiday.
So I was going to follow up with the next question, because I maybe unfairly commented that she didn't know the file and you knew it better than her, and I still think you probably do know it better than her because that's your background. But do you think she understood it, and she just obviously, this is all speculation obviously, but she really did not want to answer
I think that
her feelings on it.
Probably it was a challenging file for her.
Yeah.
I think it was a challenging bill for her. She has since said that she wasn't really in agreement with it. So it would be very difficult to sit in committee and defend something that you really had a hard time being comfortable with. And so I'm confident that that is why things happened the way they did. At the time, when I asked a question and I didn't get an answer, so I circled back around and asked again. And then the third time I said, just to clarify, what I'm actually asking is this. But I do believe, and as you say, hindsight's 20/20. Looking back, I think she just did not want to
go down those roles.
Yeah, she didn't want to address that issue.
She didn't want to say something that would put her government in a place at that point in time.
In her oath as a minister.
Exactly, because you step out of line in that committee, and normally she would be done by the end of the day.
So I don't know if you saw the headlines after that particular meeting, the one you're referring to, but the headline in the Globe and Mail the next day was, or maybe it was the National Post, I have to go back and look, was Minister Freeland was a witness at Senate committee, and it did not go well. That was the headline. It did not go well.
No, it really didn't.
Yeah.
But so how many questions are you allowed to ask? You allowed to ask one question and follow up?
Well, it depends.
Okay, tell us about this, because...
So in Finance Committee, we're very organized. So there's a bit of an order. The steering committee, each group has someone on the steering committee. So the steering committee members go first. And then after that, the largest committee or the largest group gets the first question, and so on and so forth from there. And then it works its way down to the people who have been most recently appointed. So I'm usually somewhat near the end of the first round of questions, and we usually get 5 minutes. So whatever you can squeeze in 5 minutes. And
so
sometimes
if the person that you're asking the question to decides to answer for 5 minutes, that takes your time.
Well, what ends up happening sometimes is that senators will say, excuse me, I don't want to interrupt you, but I've only got 5 minutes. Can you answer this? And sometimes they're sharing great information. It just might not be exactly what you were looking for. So then after that first round of questions, there's another round, and we just keep going until we run out of time. And sometimes the second round, there will be a senator that might say, I don't have a question this time. which allows a little bit more time. But usually the first round is 5 minutes, second round is 3 minutes, and then after that, if there's any time left, the people at the top of the list get to ask a question. Or they might say, we've gone through twice, does anybody have a really burning question? My hand's always up. But I wanted to say too, you mentioned that people don't get to see what goes on in the Senate, but we are televised live. Senate sittings are televised live, and so are all of our committee meetings, with the exception of some brief in-camera points when we might be going through the actual wording of a bill.
Right.
And that's on CPAC, I'm assuming?
No, if you go on the Senate website itself,
So it's streamed.
there.
So it's
yeah,
streamed,
it's streamed.
okay.
Yeah, it's streamed live. And I mean, you might have to be a bit of a policy person to be interested, but I find it fascinating. And sometimes when I'm in one committee and there's another committee going on at the same time that I'm interested in, like foreign affairs or transportation communication, I might go back and watch their committee after I get home from
Yeah,
mine.
we are of like mind.
That's good to know.
I used to sit up when I was in opposition. I was first elected in opposition. I really wanted to learn how to do question period. I would watch
Parliament was the best.
Parliament at night when the rerun would come back on at 11 o'clock at night, just to see how the best way of leading up your questions and getting your questions through.
Yeah, that was good that you did that.
So our question period is a bit different
Nobody
than
else. You have to learn.
Well, that is how you learn. But our question period is a little bit different. It's certainly more, I would say, for the most part, much more
Like not as
calm and
confrontational.
non-confrontational,
Right.
definitely.
That's good.
And something else I wanted to share, you know, a lot of people think, well, you know, how much do you actually work? Is it a sleepy Senate? I don't think I have ever worked this hard in my life.
Well, there you go.
We start sitting at 2 in the afternoon, but of course the whole day is filled with meetings and committees and stakeholder meetings and staff meetings and, you know, all the other things that we need to do. So we start at 2 and we sit until we're done, which could be as late as midnight and which has been as late as midnight.
Okay.
So
Because you have to keep up with the House business. When House business gets passed, it comes through to you guys. So then you have to start all that process with committees and
as I
hearings.
said, we have our own bills too.
Right.
Something else that the Senate is very well known for is doing excellent reports.
Yes.
So there might be a report, the Agriculture Committee recently did a report on the soil health of Canada. Very good report. And there's really exceptional reports. I know when I was at the Chamber, I used to actually get Senate reports and look through them for issues that we might be able to use as policy ideas.
And leverage to the provincial level or federal.
Yeah, absolutely. But the reports, the quality, the amount of research, the stakeholder engagement is unbelievable. And so that's also some very important work of the Senate. And we also have a program called Cengage, which is the Senate Engaging. So I've had an opportunity to go out and speak at a number of different schools, just to help youth learn about what the Senate is and learn about, you know, our parliamentary process. And I think that's really important as well.
So do the schools apply to that, to have you come? Is that what they do?
Yeah, they just go online and request.
So
and
they like to have any senator, or do they request certain senators, or are you dedicated to your region?
Usually it would be within your own region.
And when you're home, then you would take that on.
Exactly. I've got one next week, actually with the district, I think, because I'm actually talking to them about Cengage itself, encouraging them to take advantage of the program. But I have had a couple of times in Ottawa, because I like doing it, where they've asked me to do some schools in the Senate. So students that have come to the Senate that were from that local Ottawa region, they've asked me to be the senator that speaks to them, and that's been kind of fun as well.
It is fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Back with the reports that the committee members do. Do they do the reports based on the committees, or are those special committees that are formed? Do you know?
Based on the committees themselves. So, for example, the Agriculture Committee decided that that was an important issue that we needed to look into. Soil health. And so they decided to do a report on it. Now, I sit on national finance. So for us, it's a little bit different because we are so busy just dealing with estimates, main estimates, supplementaries, and so on, that we don't really have the opportunity to do extra studies. But most of the other committees do studies,
Nice.
and they're amazing studies, and they're all available also on the website. I would encourage anybody who's interested in the work of the Senate to have a look, because there's some great work there.
And sometimes they'll do a road consultation process, I guess, public consultation process, and they've been in Fredericton and New Brunswick before. And
Yeah, I think just before I was appointed to the Senate, Social Affairs Committee, SOCI Committee, did come through Fredericton, and they were doing a study on temporary foreign workers, and they came through New Brunswick.
That's correct.
right.
Well, okay. Well, let's take a little break.
Yeah, let's take a little break. That was a lot.
It was. So we'll be back.
Very interesting.
Right after this with Krista Ross, our senator from New Brunswick. And welcome back to the Carr Brothers Show. It's episode 131. I'm Jack.
And I'm Jeff, and just in case you weren't here for the earlier sessions, or earlier segments, Jody is not able to be here tonight. He is away this week, and he will return next week, we hope.
That's right. We can
Everything
only
goes well.
We're having a lot of fun. It's episode 131 with New Brunswick's newest senator. Just over a year, you've been appointed as Senator Krista Ross, and we've had a great discussion. So we're very thankful that you've been able, finally, to be able to come on.
Yes.
We've tried to schedule you in, and now we're able to do this, and it's just been so much fun to talk to you.
Just
Thank
a
you.
testament of how busy she is.
Thank you.
We've been trying a long time to get our schedules together and get you
Well,
nailed down. So
My
we're
sitting
pretty excited.
schedule throughout the years is quite heavy, and I generally fly to Ottawa every Monday and fly home every Friday. But right now, because things are
Right.
prorogued, I have a little bit of time that I'm now able to spend doing some things in my community, doing some things in the province, some speaking engagements, some stakeholder meetings, things that I really have a hard time doing during
Right.
the typical timeline.
Yeah. So tell us about how Parliament being prorogued affects Senate, because tell us the relationship there and why. If
Sure.
people really don't understand, we maybe touched on a little bit the relationship in the earlier segments, but tell us about that.
So our role is to review and pass bills. So if the House of Commons is not sitting, there are no bills for us to work on. So whenever they have a break week or something like that, or a non-sitting week, we do as well. But at this time, when Parliament is prorogued, actually what's happening too is that all bills that were not actually passed are gone.
Yeah, they die.
Just died.
So they have now died on the order paper. So there would have been, as I said, 4 types of bills. There would have been private and public bills and government bills from both the House of Commons and the Senate that would have been at every level. So there would have been.
Even if there was like a Senate bill going through the
really?
process,
They're
that would
all-
even.
yeah, they're all gone.
Oh wow.
And so even if one of them was, just past the committee stage and just waiting to be voted on, or maybe even passed in the House but didn't get to the Senate, or passed in the Senate but didn't get to the House of Commons, those bills are all gone. It's not to say they can't be reintroduced in,
Start the
another
process
session,
over again.
but they'll be started over,
Right.
and whatever happened in that first time around may change. So amendments that got made or things that happened may turn out differently. But yeah, everything has to start over again. So when the House of Commons is prorogued, we are not there either.
So you're eagerly waiting for March the 20, is it 21st?
It's the 24th.
24th for the House to come back in. A new throne speech comes in, and just wait to see what happens after that. And could be a long summer.
Well, probably there are so many different scenarios
I
that
know.
could take place.
So speculative.
But if there's a supply bill or the throne speech, and if the government is defeated, then there's 37 to 51 day window of time when after the writs drop before an election. And so we would not be sitting during that time as well. And then once an election is held, we would come back basically when the House of Commons comes back, or once the new MPs are sworn in and so on, we would come back as well.
I would expect if it goes like that and the election happens and there's a new government elected or the same government's elected, I mean, polls are showing one thing or another, but I would expect the new government will want to come back sooner rather than later and get some money estimates sorted out and some budgets going there again. So that's when your role would come back into play again right away.
So once, not while Parliament is prorogued, but once a government falls and an election has been called, the writ's been dropped, then there is such a thing as a warrant, which means that the government can spend money,
can function,
and can continue to function without passing supply bills.
Okay.
So, but the supply bill has to come up by the 26th of March, which is why we're prorogued until the 24th. So the government will either succeed or fail, fall on the throne speech or the supply bill.
Right.
But it could be that the government is able to, get some people on board and keep going. It's hard to say.
Possible.
Anything is possible.
Yeah. If we have a new prime minister in place at that time, they may be able to negotiate
agreements,
to keep going. So we'll have to just wait and see.
Yeah,
that's all we can do.
There's a lot of scenarios that could play out.
Many scenarios.
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
So we talked about the HST holiday that you spoke to on committee with on that policy. And as a previous small business owner, Chamber of Commerce executive, obviously you had a personal knowledge or personal experience and how that can affect not only Canadians but also small businesses. So that's just one issue. But how many small businesses do you hear from in the last year and a half since being named a senator because they know your experience? And you get a lot of people contacting you.
I've been really happy to hear from lots of my chamber members and from other business people from across the country who know that there's a chamber person in the Red Chamber. And I've been invited to participate in a variety of activities that would relate to business in Ottawa because of my background. So I've certainly heard from lots of my members here in Fredericton and in New Brunswick, but across the country. And I think it's been great for the Chamber to know that they have someone in the Senate that understands their challenges and their issues and really has a strong desire to see small business and entrepreneurs succeed. And so that's been really great. Certainly, I have reached out to a lot of small business owners as well on issues. So the HST holiday being one of them, I immediately began reaching out to my chamber contacts and to some of my past members to say, how will this affect you? And I reached out to accountants and I wanted to understand. And that would have been the same thing I would have done if I had been at the chamber and I heard that the government was introducing a bill of this nature. I would have said, okay, well, how is it going to impact? And, as a senator, I was not only interested in that aspect, but how is it going to impact my province, which is a province that has the harmonized sales tax and is going to lose a significant, the province predicted $62 million. But when we met with the parliamentary budget officer, he told us 70 million. And so that was the number that the province didn't even know until he mentioned it at that meeting. And he was reluctant to give an actual number until I pushed him a bit, and he did say, well, I was told not to give actual numbers, but since you asked so specifically.
Well, that's doing your job.
When you know the right questions to ask, you get the right answers. So.
Well, and when you think back, doing a bit of a retrospect, but 35 years or so since 1989 when you took on the role of the executive director, the general manager of the Fredericton Chamber, and being a small business owner and now Senate, there's a lot of struggling New Brunswickers, Canadians, but there's still a lot of fire in the belly for a lot of Canadians and New Brunswickers as well, especially that entrepreneurial spirit.
Absolutely.
What message, because you've been down in the trenches, just, like you said, making payroll and bills and policy changes that can affect your business. What message do you want to give to some of the small business owners that are still slugging away and still working towards that that goal, that dream to just keep that fire in the belly and keep the doors open.
I think the biggest thing that was important for me as an entrepreneur, and one of the biggest pieces of advice that I still give people, is to surround yourself with good people. We've all heard the adage, sell your strengths and buy your weaknesses, but figure out what it is that you're really good at and make sure in your business that that's what you're doing, and then find the very best people you can, that you can find or that you can afford at that time, to do those other pieces. Because if you can surround yourself with good people, knowledgeable people, people that want to work with you, and I always used to say too, hire for the soul and train for the role. Hire good people, not just smart people, but good people, people that have the same work ethic that you have, and people that have the same ways of thinking that you do. And don't be afraid to hire someone who's smarter than you and more creative than you and younger than you and all of those things, right? Like, get people with great ideas and bring them on board. So I think one of the most important things is that, and just to be tenacious and be willing to take educated or smart risks.
And
good advice.
Yeah, excellent.
Great
and
advice.
Always trying to encourage more women to be involved in, I mean, not just, I guess, elected politics, but with policy and things that in those leadership roles, and then small business as well. And you've talked about how you talk to a lot of school kids too. What specifically do you give to the students, but also the female students as well, that look up to you to say, hey, Krista's now a senator, or she's a successful business person, and give them hope that they can keep striving hard to achieve their dreams? I
think that I never in a million years would have imagined I would be sitting in the Senate of Canada. I feel grateful and just thankful every single day. But it is a testament that really and truly, if you want it and you work for it and you push and really focus on your career, and on your family too. I have a 19-year-old daughter, but that you can succeed, and I have to give a shout out to organizations like Chambers of Commerce for the networking, because a lot of it too is about getting people in your network who can help you and support you and encourage you and be part of your journey, give you the advice that you might need, both solicited and unsolicited sometimes. But yeah, having that network of other people who maybe have some similar, have faced similar challenges and can give you some, best practices and some ideas like that. But one thing that's very interesting with the Senate, it's one of the very few parliaments that has a higher percentage of females than males. So I believe the number is 56 out of 95 are female in the Senate. And so, that's a really
significant.
It shows great leadership, I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot of diversity in the Senate. It's really amazing. People from all kinds of different cultural, ethnic, career, every kind of background you could imagine.
That's excellent. That's a really good statistic there for that. So that's great. Well, is there anything else? We've got just a few minutes left there now in the show. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, just that this has been great. I've enjoyed it, and I do encourage people to watch what the Senate's doing and share their thoughts with me. If they've got some ideas that they want to put forward, I'd welcome that.
And we can just look you up on the Senate of Canada website. And
You
you're
can.
listed right there.
Yes,
Krista
you can
Ross
see. You can
from
look
New
up any
Brunswick.
speeches I've made. You can see how I vote. You
nice.
can.
I just have one little question, because we
Yeah,
all have
sure.
mentors when we go into the role. When I went into opposition, I was full of vinegar and all kinds of other things, and Jody was there with me, and Mado and Trevor. These people have been around the business for a long time, took me under their wing. When you first went to the Hill and went into the Senate, was there a senator or two that kind of helped you along through your journey, or was there many?
Many. I can't even begin to tell you how many senators came to me in that first week or month or a few months and offered their support,
That's
offered their staff, offered anything I needed.
Nice.
Senator Quinn from St. John, he was my sponsor.
Okay.
And Senator Mockler, who's now retired, he was the chair of the Finance Committee. And he certainly gave me lots of good advice in the beginning and would call me into his office and explain how things worked. But, you know, members of the Finance Committee, many members of the Finance Committee have helped me to understand the processes.
That's good.
Yeah.
Members of my group, the CSG, and you know, you learn from everybody. Even there's a gentleman who basically oversees the operations, and he's called the Usher of the Black Rod. And the very first day I was sitting, I wasn't familiar with all the processes, and there was a lot of up and down and this sort of thing. And somebody yelled out, "Stand." And I stood, and he looked at me, and he just motioned me to sit down, so I did. And I found out that every bill is announced in the Senate every day, and stand means that bill's not being discussed today. It's going to stand on the order paper. So,
Well, you were just following orders.
exactly. Someone yelled stand, and I stood.
Exactly.
But it just helps with your transition, makes you feel comfortable,
Yeah.
and when you go in there, if there are a group of people around that want you to be successful.
Yeah.
I
It's a
would
team,
say within the first month to 2 months, I had literally spoken to every senator there. Everybody was welcoming and kind and helpful, and
Nice.
and so I'm trying to pay that forward as well. I mean, since I've joined the Senate, as you said, just over a year ago, there have been I think 10 or 11 other new senators that have been appointed. So, you know, I've tried to help them as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
Pay
Yeah.
it forward.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
All right.
Well, okay.
Excellent.
Well, looks like we've wrapped up our time here. It went
Thank
by
you.
very, very quick. So
Yes.
thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
We hope to have you again on the show sometime soon.
I hope so, too.
You know, and it'd be great to follow up on how the year goes. And with that, we'll thank our viewers for watching us on the Carr Brothers Show. We want to thank Terry Gallant, too,
Yes.
our director. He's helping us out. He's our technician and director. So we want to thank him and all the staff and volunteers at CHCO TV that helped put this show on. So with that, we'll see you next show, and have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.